The sleek command bridge of the UES Defiant hummed with tension as Admiral Susan Wright stood before the main view screen, hands clasped firmly behind her back. Her weathered face, framed by steel-gray hair, pulled into a tight bun, remained carefully neutral as she studied the 5 massive Galactic Empire warships hovering just beyond Earth's orbit. Each vessel dwarfed her flagship by at least 3 times its size, their hulls adorned with the blood-red insignia of the Empire, a stylized gauntlet crushing a star. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Commander Jack Nelson looked up from his console, his dark features illuminated by holographic displays. "All 5 Imperial warships maintaining position, Admiral. Their weapon systems are powered but not locked. They're sending a communication request." Susan nodded. "Keep our quantum shields on standby. Don't let them detect the energy signature. And prepare all Porcupine Network assets for immediate activation." "Yes, Admiral," Nelson replied, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. In the 6 years since humanity had discovered the Empire's expansion toward the solar system, Earth had been preparing. The Porcupine Network, a web of stealth satellites, underground bases, quantum technology, and experimental wormhole generators, had been built in absolute secrecy. Now that preparation would be tested. Susan's secure comm channel chimed. The holographic image of President Olivia Martinez materialized beside her, transmitted from the Global Decision Circle in Geneva. The president's expression was grave, her olive complexion appearing paler than usual under the harsh lights of the emergency session. "Admiral Wright, the Security Council is assembled. All nations are represented. We're monitoring your situation," President Martinez said. "What are we facing?" 5 capital ships, Madam President. Their fleet configuration suggests a standard Imperial First Contact protocol, but with significantly more firepower than necessary for a diplomatic mission. Susan's eyes narrowed. "This is an intimidation tactic." "Then we proceed as planned," Martinez replied. "Open communications, but keep Operation Porcupine ready. The moment they show hostile intent, you have full authorization." "Understood, Madam President." As the presidential hologram faded, Susan turned to Captain Samantha Lee, who managed the ship's cloaked satellite network. "Captain, status on our invisible eyes?" The young officer looked up from her station, brushing a strand of black hair from her face. "All stealth satellites in position, Admiral. 300 units surrounding the Imperial formation. Quantum entanglement communication is stable. They can't detect our transmissions." Susan nodded and took a deep breath. "Open a channel to the Empire flagship." The main view screen flickered, revealing the imposing figure of Ambassador Zorkthal. The alien diplomat stood nearly 7 feet tall, his scaled blue skin glistening under the harsh lights of the Imperial bridge. Multiple sets of golden eyes blinked in unison as he assessed the human commander. "Admiral Susan Wright of Earth." Zorkthal began his translator, converting the guttural sounds of Imperial Standard into flawless English. "The glorious Galactic Empire extends its greetings to your primitive world." Susan maintained her composure. "Ambassador Zorkthal, Earth welcomes peaceful contact with all spacefaring civilizations. What brings such an impressive delegation to our system?" Zorkthal's upper lip curled, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "The Supreme Overlord Xanthrix has determined that your species has developed sufficient technology to be of value to the Empire. We offer you the privilege of joining our 1,000-world collective as a resource world." Resource world. Susan asked, though she already knew what the designation meant from intelligence gathered by deep space probes. "Your planet will provide materials, labor, and genetic diversity to the Empire. In exchange, you receive protection and limited access to Imperial technology." Zorkthal's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "The alternative is less comfortable." Behind Susan, the bridge crew tensed. Everyone knew the Empire's pattern. They had subjugated hundreds of worlds across the galaxy, stripping them of resources and reducing their populations to virtual slavery. "I see," Susan replied evenly. And if Earth wished to join the Empire as a full member world with equal rights and representation, Zorkthal made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. Impossible. Your species is barely a millennium into space travel. Full membership requires at least 50,000 years of civilization. He leaned forward. You have 24 of your Earth hours to accept our generous offer before we demonstrate our persuasive capabilities. As the transmission ended, Susan turned to her crew. And so it begins. Activate Diplomatic Protocol Hedgehog. Let's buy Dr. Carter and his team the time they need. Thousands of miles below, deep within the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Alan Carter rushed through the underground laboratory complex, his lanky frame moving with surprising speed for a man in his 60s. Holographic displays surrounded him, showing real-time data from quantum shield tests and wormhole stability calculations. Progress report, he demanded, as he entered the central chamber, where dozens of scientists worked frantically at various stations. Dr. Eliza Washington looked up from her quantum calculation models. Shield harmonics are stable at 97%. The reflective capability should hold against anything short of a Nova-class weapon. And the wormhole generators? Carter asked, his piercing blue eyes scanning the readouts. We've achieved micro-jumps of up to 5,000 kilometers, with 99.7% accuracy, replied Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, the team's theoretical physicist. The energy requirements are still enormous, but within our capacity for the planned operation. Carter nodded, running a hand through his disheveled gray hair. Good. We may need to deploy sooner than expected. The Empire ships have arrived and they're not here for a friendly chat. In Geneva, President Olivia Martinez stood before the assembled representatives of Earth's United Nations. The Global Decision Circle had been convened in emergency session with leaders from every continent, gathered physically or via secure holographic presence. The time we've been preparing for has arrived. Martinez began, her voice strong, despite the weight of responsibility. For 6 years we've known this day would come. The Galactic Empire has expanded across thousands of worlds, and now they stand at our doorstep with demands that amount to planetary enslavement. The chamber remained silent as Martinez continued. Operation Porcupine is fully prepared. Admiral Wright is conducting preliminary negotiations to buy us time, but we must vote now on our response. The Empire expects us to surrender or negotiate terms of submission. I propose we show them that humanity chooses neither. The Chinese premier spoke first. The defense systems are untested against Imperial technology. If we provoke them, we risk immediate attack. With respect, Premier, responded the Nigerian president. Intelligence from our deep space probes suggests that submission leads to worse outcomes. Resource worlds are stripped of autonomy and eventually of resources. Resistance may be our only option. Martinez nodded. We've spent 6 years, and the combined resources of every nation on Earth preparing our defense. The Porcupine Network represents the pinnacle of human ingenuity, quantum shields, stealth satellites, and prototype wormhole technology. We will never have a better chance than now, while we still control our planet and our destiny. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Operation Porcupine received authorization by an overwhelming majority. Martinez activated her secure channel to Admiral Wright. Susan, you have the green light. Engage Diplomatic Challenge Protocol, and if they respond with force, unleash the full capacity of Porcupine. Back on the Defiant, Susan Wright prepared for the second round of negotiations. This time, she would push harder, testing the Empire's patience, while the final preparations were completed planet-side. Channel open to the Imperial flagship, announced Commander Nelson. Ambassador Zorkthal appeared on screen once more, this time accompanied by Fleet Commander Drulsk, a towering figure with crimson scales and cybernetic enhancements visible along his jawline. Admiral Wright, Zorkthal began, "Have you come to accept the Empire's generous terms?" Susan smiled politely. Ambassador, we've been studying your proposal. Earth is interested in establishing relations with the Empire, but as equal partners in trade and cultural exchange. We believe we have technologies and resources that would benefit an equal partnership. Drulsk snarled something that the translator didn't catch, while Zorkthal's eyes narrowed. You misunderstand your position, human. You are not being offered a choice. You will submit, or you will be conquered. Those are the only options available to a species as young as yours. Perhaps we're younger than many Empire worlds, Susan countered. But we've learned quickly. We'd like to propose a demonstration exchange of technologies to establish a baseline for future cooperation. There will be no exchange, Zorkthal snapped. You will submit your world to immediate resource extraction protocols, or face the consequences. Susan leaned forward. And what might those consequences be, Ambassador? Fleet Commander Drulsk stepped forward, pushing Zorkthal aside. Enough of this. Your primitive species fails to comprehend its position. Perhaps a demonstration is indeed required. He turned to someone off-screen. Target their orbital defense platforms. Minimal yield. Susan's expression remained calm. I wouldn't advise that action, Commander. Drulsk's translator conveyed his mocking laughter. Your advice is irrelevant, human. The transmission cut off, and Commander Nelson's console immediately lit up with warnings. Their powering weapon systems energy buildup detected on 3 Imperial vessels. Activate quantum shields, Susan ordered. Tight beam focus on incoming energy patterns. And signal all Porcupine assets. Operation Hedgehog is go. The first Imperial energy barrage struck the seemingly undefended Earth vessels and orbital platforms. Instead of the expected destruction, the quantum shields activated milliseconds before impact. The advanced technology didn't merely block the attack, it redirected it, reflecting the energy back toward its source with amplified force. 2 Imperial ships reeled from the unexpected counterattack, their forward sections damaged by their own weapons. Chaos erupted across the Imperial formation as commanders struggled to understand what had happened. They're regrouping, reported Captain Lee. Adjusting weapons frequencies, they're quick learners. Susan nodded. They would be. Initiate Phase 2, deploy wormhole tanks. Throughout the solar system, hidden installations activated. From bases on the dark side of the moon, beneath the waters of Earth's oceans, and within hollowed-out asteroids, humanity's secret fleet emerged. 500 vessels of various sizes, equipped with quantum shields and wormhole jump capability, suddenly appeared in a perfect sphere around the Imperial formation. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship, Grand Admiral Vornath, who had assumed direct command after the initial failure, watched in stunned silence as human ships materialized from nowhere surrounding his forces. Impossible, he hissed. Their technology is primitive. They cannot possess jump drives. Ambassador Zorkthal studied the tactical displays with growing concern. Intelligence reports indicated no defensive capability beyond their orbital platforms. This is unexpected. Fleet Commander Drulsk was less measured in his response. It changes nothing. They may have surprised us, but our ships still outclass theirs in every way. Prepare all weapons. Full barrage across all targets. As the Imperial ships fired, the human vessels executed their next surprise. Micro wormholes opened directly in the paths of incoming energy weapons, redirecting the destructive force to emerge behind the Imperial ships, catching them in their own crossfire. Aboard the Defiant, Susan watched with grim satisfaction as the coordinated defense unfolded exactly as planned. Deploy gravity traps, she ordered. Let's limit their maneuverability. Captain Lee nodded. Gravity generators online, creating localized distortion fields. The space around the Imperial vessels began to warp, creating pockets of intensified gravity that hampered their movements. As they struggled against the invisible bonds, Earth ships pressed their advantage, focusing firepower on key weapon systems and propulsion nodes. The first skirmish lasted less than 30 minutes. When it ended, 1 Imperial vessel was severely damaged, 2 others had sustained moderate damage, and the Empire had retreated to regroup beyond the orbit of Mars. In the aftermath, Susan opened a channel to Earth. President Martinez's hologram appeared, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "First round to humanity," Susan reported. "But they'll be back and in greater numbers. This was just their advance guard." Martinez nodded solemnly. Dr. Carter reports that all systems performed above expectations. The wormhole technology was particularly effective. "It won't work as well next time," Susan cautioned. "They'll adapt quickly. We need to prepare for the main assault." "How long do we have?" Susan studied the long-range sensor data. "Based on their communications and the movement of their reserve forces near Jupiter, I'd estimate 3 days before their main fleet arrives." "Then we use that time wisely," Martinez declared. "The world stands united, Admiral. Every nation, every resource committed to our defense." The 3 days that followed saw frantic activity across Earth and throughout the solar system. Dr. Carter and his team worked around the clock, refining the quantum shield frequencies and expanding the wormhole generator network. Military forces worldwide mobilized, preparing for the possibility of ground invasion. On the third day, the Imperial counterattack began. 200 capital ships emerged from hyperspace, forming a massive armada that dwarfed Earth's defensive fleet. "They're not taking any chances this time," Susan observed from the Defiance bridge. "Signal all commands Operation Porcupine Phase 3. Deploy all assets." Earth's response was immediate and coordinated. The stealth satellite network now expanded to over 1,000 units, activated simultaneously. Nuclear-powered electromagnetic pulses disrupted Imperial communications, while quantum interference generators created false sensor readings. As the Imperial fleet advanced, they encountered a defensive line unlike anything they had expected. Earth vessels utilized short-range wormhole jumps to appear and disappear across the battlefield, striking from unexpected vectors before retreating to safety. Meanwhile, Commander Jack Nelson led a specialized team focused on information warfare. "The virus is uploaded," he reported to Admiral Wright. "We've penetrated their battle network." The sophisticated cyber attack had been years in development, designed specifically to exploit vulnerabilities in Imperial communication protocols. As it spread through their network, it introduced subtle errors in targeting calculations and created false enemy signatures that caused Imperial ships to fire upon each other. The battle raged across the space between Earth and Mars. Imperial landing craft managed to breach the orbital defense and headed toward Earth's surface, only to be caught in carefully laid gravity traps that disabled their navigation systems. Major Frank Wilson and his Special Operations team waited in the Amazon rainforest as an Imperial troop carrier crashed 2 kilometers from their position. "Strike Team Alpha in position," he reported through his quantum-encrypted communicator. "Hostiles are disembarking. Count 30 Imperial troops, heavy armament." "Proceed with capture operation," came the response from command. "We need live specimens for intelligence." Wilson signaled his team of 20 elite soldiers, each equipped with advanced combat exoskeletons and neural-linked weapon systems. They moved silently through the dense vegetation surrounding the crash site. The Imperial troops were disoriented, their environment suits struggling to compensate for Earth's atmospheric composition and gravity. Wilson's team struck with precision, utilizing stun weapons and localized EMP devices to neutralize the aliens' technological advantages. Similar scenes played out across the globe as Earth's military forces engaged Imperial landing parties. The invaders, while technologically superior in many respects, found themselves unprepared for Earth's varied environments and the guerrilla tactics employed against them. In orbit, the main battle reached its crescendo on the 7th day. The Imperial fleet, plagued by false sensor readings and communication failures, had lost its cohesion. Nearly 50 ships had been severely damaged by friendly fire incidents caused by Nelson's virus. Grand Admiral Vornath, his flagship now showing battle damage along its port side, opened a direct communication channel to the Defiant. His multiple eyes blazed with fury as he addressed Admiral Wright. "This resistance is futile," he snarled. "You have caused us inconvenience, nothing more. Even now our Nova cannon prepares to fire. One shot will render your planet uninhabitable." Susan maintained her composure. "We're well aware of your superweapon, Admiral. In fact, we've been paying it special attention." At that moment, deep in space beyond the orbit of Neptune, Major Frank Wilson led a different mission. His special operations team, transported by a stealth craft equipped with experimental long-range wormhole technology, had infiltrated the Imperial construction facility where the Nova cannon was being assembled. The massive weapon designed to fire planet-killer projectiles loomed before them, its central chamber pulsing with exotic energy. Wilson's team moved methodically through the facility, planting quantum-triggered explosive devices at key structural points. "All charges set," Wilson reported. "Beginning final phase." The team's specialist, Sergeant Layla Khan, interfaced with the facility's power core. "Initiating overload sequence. We have 15 minutes before this place becomes a new star." As Wilson's team retreated to their extraction point, Imperial security forces discovered the intrusion. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and armored troops converged on the human operatives. "We've got company," announced Corporal James Rodriguez, the team's rear guard. "Lots of company." Wilson made a split-second decision. "Khan, Rodriguez, Martinez, hold them here. The rest of you fall back to the ship. I'll place the final charge myself." Without waiting for acknowledgement, Wilson sprinted toward the Nova cannon's power core. Imperial energy weapons scorched the walls around him as he ran his exoskeleton's enhanced speed, barely keeping him ahead of the deadly barrage. The power core chamber was massive, a cathedral of alien technology, built around a contained quantum singularity. Wilson placed the final explosive device, the trigger, that would cause a cascading failure throughout the system, directly on the containment field generator. As he turned to retreat, an Imperial officer appeared in the doorway, weapon raised. The alien fired, and Wilson felt searing pain as the energy bolt struck his left side. His exoskeleton compensated, injecting combat stimulants, but he knew he was badly wounded. With his remaining strength, Wilson activated the charge, and then his emergency teleport beacon. The experimental technology, a one-use short-range wormhole generator, had never been tested in the field. As the Imperial officer fired again, Wilson's form shimmered and vanished. He rematerialized aboard the extraction vessel, collapsing immediately. "Charge set!" he gasped. "Get us out of here!" The stealth ship accelerated away from the facility moments before the explosives detonated. The quantum singularity, suddenly freed from its containment field, expanded for a microsecond before collapsing in on itself, creating a massive implosion that consumed the entire facility and the Nova cannon with it. Aboard the Imperial flagship, Grand Admiral Vornath received the news of the Nova cannon's destruction with stunned disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "They couldn't have known its location." Ambassador Zorkthal, watching the Admiral closely, made a decision. "Perhaps it is time to consider alternative approaches," he suggested cautiously. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates." Vornath rounded on the diplomat, his scales flushing with anger. "You suggest surrender to primitives." "Not surrender," Zorkthal countered. "Strategic reassessment. We have lost nearly half our fleet to what was supposed to be an easy conquest. The Supreme Overlord will demand explanations." Before the Admiral could respond, the ship rocked violently. Earth's forces, sensing the Empire's moment of vulnerability, had launched a coordinated attack on the flagship's propulsion systems. "All remaining ships concentrate fire on the human command vessel," Vornath ordered desperately. "We will end this with a decisive strike." But it was too late. The Imperial fleet, its coordination shattered by the computer virus, and its forces divided by the hit-and-run tactics of Earth's smaller vessels, could no longer mount an effective offensive. After another day of increasingly one-sided combat, Vornath gave the order to retreat. Of the 200 Imperial ships that had entered the solar system, barely 50 limped away, their hyperspace engines strained to maximum capacity as they fled the unexpected defeat. On Earth, celebrations erupted across the globe. For the first time in recorded history, The Galactic Empire had been decisively repelled. President Martinez addressed the United Nations from the Global Decision Circle. Today marks not just a victory for Earth, but a turning point in galactic history, she declared. The Empire believed us weak and divided. They found us strong and united. They expected submission and encountered determination. But our work has only begun. In the weeks that followed, humanity consolidated its position. The Porcupine Network was expanded throughout the solar system, creating a defensive perimeter that extended beyond the orbit of Pluto. Earth scientists worked to reverse engineer captured Imperial technology, advancing human capabilities by decades in mere months. Most significantly, Ambassador Nancy Reid spearheaded the formation of the Free Worlds Alliance. Using captured Imperial communication technology, Earth reached out to other subjugated worlds and offered alliance against their common oppressor. 6 months after the Empire's defeat at Earth, representatives from 27 alien civilizations gathered in Geneva for the first Interstellar Congress of Free Peoples. Species that had lived under Imperial domination for centuries saw in humanity a spark of hope, a young race that had accomplished what was thought impossible. Ambassador Reid, her diplomatic skills tested to their limits as she navigated the complex interactions between vastly different species, proposed the Mars Accord, a formal alliance dedicated to mutual defense and the gradual liberation of Empire-controlled worlds. Among the alien representatives was Kra, a former Imperial soldier who had defected during the Earth campaign. The reptilian alien, his scales bearing the ritual scars of his warrior caste, addressed the assembled delegates with passion. "I served the Empire for 30 cycles," he declared, his translator struggling to convey the emotion in his native language. "I helped subjugate 12 worlds and believed in the supremacy of the Imperial way. But on Earth, I witnessed something unknown in the Empire: unity, in diversity strength through cooperation rather than domination. The Empire teaches that such things are impossible, that only through strict hierarchy and control can civilization advance. Earth has proven this lie." Dr. Alan Carter, now heading the newly established Interstellar Technology Exchange, worked closely with scientists from allied worlds. The quantum shield technology, combined with knowledge from species with thousands of years of space travel experience, led to breakthroughs that transformed humanity's understanding of the universe. Admiral Susan Wright, promoted to Supreme Commander of the Alliance Defense Force, oversaw the integration of Earth's military strategies with those of their new allies. The Empire succeeded for millennia because they isolated their conquests from each other, she explained to her multi-species command staff. "They prevented cooperation and cultural exchange. Our strength lies precisely in what they fear: our diversity and our ability to learn from each other." 1 year after the initial conflict, as the Free Worlds Alliance continued to grow in strength and influence, the Empire initiated diplomatic contact. Supreme Overlord Xanthrix, the absolute ruler of 1,000 worlds, requested a direct communication with Earth's leadership. In the Global Decision Circle, now expanded to include representatives from allied planets, President Martinez prepared to receive the transmission. Admiral Wright and Ambassador Reid stood beside her, along with Dr. Carter and commanders from various Alliance worlds. The holographic image that materialized before them depicted a being of imposing presence. Xanthrix stood nearly 9 feet tall, his purple-black scales adorned with symbols of office crafted from rare metals. Multiple sets of eyes, each a different color, regarded the assembled leaders with cold calculation. President Martinez of Earth. The Supreme Overlord began his translator, conveying his deep, resonant voice. "Your world has accomplished something unprecedented in the history of our empire. You have earned our attention." Martinez stepped forward. "Supreme Overlord, we receive your communication in the spirit of potential peace, but we speak not just for Earth now, but for the Free Worlds Alliance." Xanthrix's primary eyes narrowed. "An alliance of former Imperial territories. Yes, we are aware of your recruitment efforts. Not recruitment, Reed interjected. Mutual recognition of sovereignty and shared purpose. The Supreme Overlord studied the human diplomat for a moment before continuing. The Empire has existed for 50,000 years. We have encountered and absorbed countless civilizations. Some resisted briefly. None have accomplished what Earth has done. Perhaps that says more about the Empire than about those civilizations, Martinez suggested. Xanthrix made a sound that might have been amusement. Indeed. Which is why I propose a treaty. The Empire will recognize a neutral zone encompassing all current Alliance worlds. We will withdraw our forces from this region and establish diplomatic relations. Admiral Wright stepped forward. And what does the Empire expect in return? Access to your quantum shield and wormhole technologies, Xanthrix replied, without hesitation. And guarantees that the Alliance will not expand beyond its current membership. Martinez shook her head. The first point is negotiable under strict limitations and with fair compensation. The second is not. Every world must be free to choose its own path. That is the founding principle of our alliance. The negotiations continued for months, conducted on the neutral ground of Mars, which had been transformed into a diplomatic hub for interstellar relations. The Mars Accord, eventually signed by representatives of the Empire, and the Alliance established the boundaries of Alliance space, required the Empire to pay reparations for damages and recognize the sovereignty of all member worlds. Most significantly, it included provisions for cultural and scientific exchange between the two powers, a revolutionary concept in imperial history. For millennia, the Empire had taken what it wanted through force. Now, for the first time, it would engage in equitable trade and diplomatic relations. On the day the accord was ratified, Ambassador Reed stood with Quarry on the observation deck of the Mars Diplomatic Center, looking out at the red planet's transformed landscape. Terraforming efforts had begun with massive atmospheric processors working to create breathable air and sustainable ecosystems. "Do you believe they'll honor the agreement?" Kra asked, his skepticism evident despite the translator's neutral tone. Reed considered the question carefully. The Empire is built on power. For thousands of years that power was unchallenged. Now they've encountered something new, a force that opposes them, not through greater strength, but through different strength. She smiled. They're curious, if nothing else, and curiosity may lead to change. The Supreme Overlord does not change easily, Kra warned. Perhaps not, Reed acknowledged. But civilizations do evolve, even ancient ones. The Empire has begun trading with Alliance worlds, exchanging ideas, as well as resources. Their citizens are learning that there are alternatives to conquest and hierarchy. On Earth, life had transformed in the aftermath of the conflict. The united response to the Imperial threat had broken down the last significant barriers between nations. Humanity had emerged not just as a spacefaring civilization, but as a galactic power, with responsibilities extending far beyond their home planet. Dr. Carter, working with a team of human and alien scientists, developed the first stable long-range wormhole generator. The technology revolutionized interstellar travel, allowing instant transportation between distant points without the need for conventional propulsion. This is just the beginning, he told President Martinez during the inaugural activation ceremony. With our allies' knowledge of stellar cartography and our quantum engineering, we can create a network spanning the entire alliance. Distance will no longer divide us. Major Frank Wilson, recovered from his wounds, sustained during the Nova Cannon mission, led the newly formed Interstellar Security Force, a multi-species organization dedicated to protecting Alliance worlds from threats both imperial and otherwise. The Empire isn't the only danger out there, he cautioned during a briefing with Admiral Wright. Our deep space probes have detected evidence of other power blocks beyond Imperial space. Some appear even more aggressive in their expansion. Susan nodded soberly. The Alliance must be prepared for all possibilities. Earth showed what a united response can accomplish, but we can't become complacent. 5 years after the initial Imperial incursion, Humanity had established colonies on Mars, Europa, and several extrasolar planets offered by their allies. Earth itself had been transformed by the influx of alien knowledge and culture, with major cities now hosting embassy districts, where representatives from dozens of species lived and worked alongside humans. In a surprising development, limited tourism had begun between Alliance worlds and progressive regions of the Empire. Cultural exchange programs allowed Imperial citizens to experience the democratic systems of the Alliance, while Alliance scholars gained access to the vast knowledge accumulated over the Empire's 50-millennium history. Ambassador Zorkthal, who had led the original Imperial delegation to Earth, requested and received permission to serve as the Empire's permanent representative to the Alliance. During a private meeting with Susan Wright, now serving as Earth's defense minister, he made a remarkable admission. "The Empire has existed unchanged for so long that we believed our way was the only path to civilization," he said, his once arrogant demeanor replaced by thoughtful consideration. "Earth showed us another possibility. Some in the Imperial Court now question doctrines that have gone unchallenged for millennia." Susan regarded him skeptically. "Revolution within the Empire." "Evolution," Zorkthal corrected. "Slow, cautious, but real. The Supreme Overlord would never admit it publicly, but your resistance forced the Imperial leadership to reconsider assumptions about governance innovation and cultural development." True to Zorkthal's assessment, the next decade saw gradual reforms within Imperial territory bordering Alliance space. Trade outposts became centers of cultural exchange, and several Imperial worlds established limited forms of local self-governance, an unprecedented development in Empire history. The Alliance continued to grow as subjugated worlds within Imperial territory increasingly demanded the autonomy they saw their neighbors enjoying. Rather than risk another devastating conflict, Imperial governors often negotiated transitions to semi-autonomous status, with many eventually applying for Alliance membership. 20 years after humanity's first contact with the Empire President Martinez, her hair now white, her face lined with the wisdom of 2 decades of interstellar leadership, addressed the Interstellar Congress one final time before retirement. "When Earth stood alone against Imperial might, our victory seemed impossible," she began. "Yet we prevailed not through superior strength, but through unity, innovation, and unwavering commitment to our values. In the years since, we have built something unprecedented, an alliance based not on domination, but on mutual respect and cooperation." She gestured to the assembled representatives, now numbering over 100 different species. "The Free Worlds Alliance has become a beacon of hope in a galaxy long accustomed to tyranny. We have shown that diverse civilizations can work together, that cooperation yields greater progress than conquest, and that freedom is the birthright of all sentient beings." As Martinez concluded her address, a message arrived from deep space. An Imperial world, without consulting the Supreme Overlord, had declared independence and requested immediate Alliance recognition and protection. It was the first such direct challenge to Imperial authority in 50,000 years. The Congress erupted in debate. Some representatives advocated caution, fearing Imperial retaliation. Others argued for immediate support, seeing an opportunity to expand Alliance influence. The discussion continued for hours, with passionate arguments from all sides. Finally, Susan Wright rose to speak. Though retired from military service, she remained an influential voice in Alliance affairs. The chamber fell silent as she approached the central podium. 20 years ago, Earth faced the prospect of subjugation or destruction, she began. "We survived because we refused to submit to tyranny, and because we discovered strength in unity. The world seeking our protection today faces the same choice we did. If we deny them our support now, we betray the very principles upon which this alliance was founded." The vote that followed was nearly unanimous. The alliance would recognize the independence of Proxima Centauri IV and extend its protection against any Imperial reprisal. Ambassadors were dispatched immediately, along with a defense fleet commanded by Admiral Zhang, Susan's former protege. The expected Imperial response never came. Instead, after weeks of silence, Supreme Overlord Xanthrix requested another direct communication with Alliance leadership. When his holographic image appeared before the Congress, many noted subtle changes in his appearance and demeanor. The symbols of office he wore were less ostentatious, and his posture seemed less rigid than before. The Empire acknowledges the sovereignty of Proxima Centauri 4, Xanthrix announced without preamble. Furthermore, we propose an expansion of the Mars Accord to establish protocols for worlds seeking transition from imperial governance to independence. The announcement stunned the Congress. Ambassador Reed, now serving as Alliance High Representative, responded carefully. The Alliance welcomes this unexpected development. May I ask what prompted this change in imperial policy? Xanthrix's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that his species used to indicate thoughtful consideration. The Empire has endured for 50 millennia by adapting when necessary. We have observed the increased productivity and innovation in Alliance worlds. Our analyses suggest that certain forms of autonomy may be beneficial to the Empire's long-term stability. No one in the Congress was naive enough to believe that imperial policy had changed overnight, or that the Supreme Overlord had suddenly embraced democratic values. Yet the acknowledgement represented a fundamental shift in the relationship between the two powers, a recognition that the Empire could no longer simply impose its will through force. In the decades that followed, humanity expanded its influence throughout Alliance space. Earth became a center for interstellar commerce, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. The principles that had guided human civilization imperfectly applied on Earth, but more fully realized in the Alliance, spread gradually to worlds that had known only imperial hierarchy for thousands of years. The Empire remained powerful, still controlling hundreds of worlds, but its absolutist grip began to loosen. Reforms originally intended to placate restless populations became institutionalized. The relationship between the Empire and the Alliance evolved from wary hostility to cautious cooperation, particularly in the face of threats from beyond explored space. 50 years after the initial contact, Dr. Alan Carter, now well over 100 years old, his life extended by medical advances derived from Alliance knowledge, stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, the massive space habitat orbiting Earth. Beside him stood Kra, equally aged, but still standing proud, and Susan Wright, her once formidable physical presence diminished by time, but her spirit undiminished. They watched as a massive wormhole opened near the station, and through it came an Imperial diplomatic vessel. Unlike the warships of the first contact, this craft was sleek and ceremonial, its hull adorned with symbols of both the Empire and the Alliance. "Would you have believed this possible?" Carter asked his companions, gesturing toward the approaching ship. The Supreme Overlord himself coming to Earth for direct talks. Kra made the clicking sound that humans had learned was his species' version of ironic laughter. "If you had suggested it 50 years ago, I would have questioned your sanity." Susan smiled, the deep lines around her eyes crinkling. "We knew we couldn't defeat the Empire militarily, not in the long term. Their resources were too vast, their technology too advanced. But we didn't need to defeat them through force. We changed them," Carter said softly, "and they changed us. That's the true victory." The Imperial vessel docked with Harmony Station, and Supreme Overlord Xanthrix emerged. Though still the same individual who had ordered Earth's subjugation half a century earlier, he moved differently now, with less rigid formality. His entourage included not just military officers, but scientists, artists, and philosophers, representatives of imperial culture, eager to engage with their Alliance counterparts. As Earth's representatives greeted the Imperial delegation, Susan Wright reflected on the long journey that had brought them to this moment. The desperate gamble of Operation Porcupine had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, not just repelling the Empire, but ultimately transforming it. Humanity had entered the galactic stage as a defiant underdog, refusing to accept subjugation. They had emerged as something far more significant teachers of freedom to a galaxy that had forgotten its value. The Empire was changing slowly, but inexorably influenced by the principles that Earth had defended so fiercely. And as the formal reception began with representatives from 100 worlds mingling with their former oppressors, the first chapter of humanity's galactic story came to a close. Earth had declared its freedom and claimed its place among the stars. The journey ahead would bring new challenges and opportunities, but the foundation had been laid for a future where liberty and cooperation prevailed over domination and fear. The Galactic Empire, once banned from all Terran space, now entered as a guest and, perhaps eventually as a friend.